Let's see here. Before I go outside, I was going to cover a few subjects because it's all interrelated, right? Like connecting the dots of accessing a library, which is accessing the field. And I've done this actually throughout my entire history of putting videos up about map reading, mapping the universe of consciousness, and what we know are character maps. And when you look at a keyboard, that's called a character map, right? Which is based on musical notes, which is the math and the geometry. Okay, based on the template that you're running and the keyboards that you're using to communicate, which is a deadlight energy communication system. That's why the character maps on the keyboards are limited. And what is that? That's limited bandwidth, which means that all the laptops and the PCs that we're using are obsolete and they're highly limited. And they were limited on purpose so that you couldn't communicate and translate using the key codes that are running through an inverted system. Okay, so for example, if you wanted to have a bigger keyboard, keys, decryption, encryption, ciphers, maps, and you can sort of tie this together, for example, with there's another 404 redirect with data on Star Trek, because it has access to what's held in the library, which is based on all the information that's already been mapped. A star map, a universal star map, a grid map of the entire universe, any matrix that's been mapped because it's been experienced and thus recorded. So now you get into the crystalline records. It can't be distorted, nor can it be altered, because the math and the geometry is perfect. That's a perfect recording. Now you get into recordings and what we call playing it over, what we call a broken record, which is a broken arrow, because the music is distorted. So when you're clearing the field, which is the EFFI field, you're doing it with the one, because the one is forever, gifting electrons at the highest rate of speed, which means we're experiencing the light and the electrons, or if you will, the electrified sound and the light is one, because we have chosen to serve on behalf of the one. So we get our information through the one. So the one is everywhere. And because it's everywhere, it's always there first, which is the first musician, which is the first EFF5 field, which is what love is, which is what light is, which is absolute love, which is absolute purity of that love that we experience through our heart and soul. So when you're experiencing that, then it means that you know what's going on before anybody else does, if there's anybody else that is experiencing something after or later. And that's what the laptops do. That's why when you're using the laptops in the internet, you're getting information that's called late to class. You're getting it behind schedule. And you know what a schedule is, right? You look at a graphing table, right? Use whatever log scales you want to use, analogs, right? Digalogs, virtual world logs. Now we're back in the log scales. Now we're back in the log scale distribution tables, right? Of water, sound and water, right? And so why this is important is because of the little video that I just put up by, thank you, Christopher Comstock, right? Comstock. The Comstock of a video that Ashaya, the Voyager materials, put up about the emerald that we did many, many, many gazillions of years ago. And then they had to counter that with what they do in order to maintain the war game, because it's binary coded, which is the Vesca-Piscis, right? Which is 2, not 3. And that's why, as Harold Kotz pointed out, binary is not compatible with trinary, which is a hub server. So you realize when you serve forever, you're connected to the biggest and fastest hub server, which is a multiversal, cosmic level server, because you've chosen to serve forever, which means you're not holding on to one electron. Now you're with one as a one. That means you have the ability to clear every distortion that is not in an equilibrium state, so that you're experiencing giving love forever, that is equally distributed to every unit of consciousness that is now experiencing what you are, which is what love is, that I'm experiencing, which is the absolute love I experience in me that I'm gifting to others. So now you're running at the highest rate of router speed. You know what a router is, right? What a hub server is. That's the highest accelerator. So they're running behind. And what that means is that everything that they rolled out through DARPA was obsolete before they ever even started. And imagine that you know that at 4 years of age, and they haven't even rolled it out yet. That means that all the units of consciousness that were working in all these cubicles at Silicon Valley and Microsoft, that means that they were wasting all of their energy on something that doesn't exist anymore. And coincidentally enough, guess who revealed that? Kim Go-Goon. Nobody was listening. You got to catch and read the words in between what gets communicated. You could have 3,000 words that are being communicated by Kim Go-Goon, right? And then all of a sudden, she got it. She got our memo. She's getting the information. Where's she getting the information from? The hub server. When you're running the highest speed hub server, being with the one, how long is it going to take before you experience that information? Well, I can give you one example of Patty Broussard. Okay, when I posted up on her Facebook page, right? This was a war edict against the founder races, and she said that was wrong. No, Patty, that is right. Later on, she self-corrected that information. That means that that information that I was experiencing by virtue of telling her that, she got it. It took a little bit before it went through our hub server, my hub server, being connected to the Guardians, right? The Emerald Guardians. So she was able to get that information, right? So she knew where it came. So now she's able to say ditto. So how come she didn't know it before I knew it? Otherwise, she would have said the same thing. So I said it first, she said it second. You see how that works? What we're talking about here is speed ratio harmonics, between the difference between holding on to electrons and being the highest accelerator of giving away electrons. And what we're held captive to is based on the miasma body, which is a planetary miasma body. And if you want to scale it up to a galactic miasma body, and then to a universal miasma body. And that's why when I mentioned on a video on Rose Sweet about mapping a universe, how much has to be healed? Right? Yeah. So when you're mapping the math and the geometry. So when you can think of data, for example, he's translating the codes, which represent the ciphers, which are the encryption and decryption codes of what's held in a library. So for example, he could have access to, I'll just throw out a number, 1 million different languages that are based on the math and the geometry of the sound and light. The fire letters, if you will. Letters and numbers are energy. How DNA is translated, thus experienced through the math and geometry of what they experience in their own mind, that they share with others and speak the language that they do. So how many languages can be broken down, decrypted, if you will, right? And then translated in a different language, because the language that's loaded into your RAM, for example, is English. So an example of that would be thus. I'm in Reno, Nevada, okay, doing work in Reno, Nevada. So when I was a little kid, I realized, because of being an oversoul polarity integrator, right? So you realize plus, memory plus, load it, right? So I realized I was going to have to load an enormous amount of junk, goo, into my memory. But that memory is already there. But what we're talking about here is clearing all of the distortions. So that means I'm willing to take on all the distortions. Now you understand why Ashaya Down talked about being transmutation machines and polarity integrators. That requires an enormous amount of energy as an oversoul in order to be able to do that, right? Because you want to hold the poles in check, right? So that clear signals are coming through, right? So that you have the ability to be able to accrete, or if you will, I'm like a sponge, which means I can hold that much energy. Well, how much energy can you hold in just one of these little avatars, right? Because this isn't a very big unit, right? In terms of occupying space or experiencing space vectors with just one vehicle. So when you see me in the mirror, I stand outside, I'm just one. Well, how many ones are there? One is everywhere. Now you see why it is I translate, we're in everything. You can't escape the one. The one is how it all began. That's eternal energy. That's the EFFI field. That's the highest intelligence. That's the highest creative intelligence, because that's the eternal spirit of fire that's on fire to create. Now that you're on fire to create, you're using the acceleration of electrons, which means you're not holding back one electron to create something with. No, I want to be able to, I'm on fire to create. I want access to every electron that is possible for me to experience through the one. So now I'm a co-creator with the grand creator. Yeah. Now we're one with one. Now we're one with all creation. We're gifting electrons to at the same speed the one is. Whoa. That's a one firewall. That's the most powerful firewall. That's the most powerful shield. So you can see how this works with keyboards and laptops and phones and all that. And you put it, what I call through the blender, through the vortex, right? Which is the spinning data, spinning mathematical geometry, which is the GUI interface of what we see in our mirror, what was built through the use of our own energy that we now experience what that is. And when you scale that up, say, for instance, when I started in the 50s, and if I want to use an example of the house that I grew up in, and then go back there now, what has changed? Well, I'll give you a few changes, okay? What they build now, for example, I lived in a house. Well, I'll just use a couple different examples. If you go into Santa Ana, California, for example, which is sort of the hub, right? And it is a hub wheel of Orange County. And there are some houses there that were built in what's called the Victorian era, okay, that are still there. Much like the same example that Patty used about the Parthenon. Ceramic concrete, how much you can withstand, like a pole shift, right? So you can go and look at these houses that are in Santa Ana, and they're still intact. They're sturdy. They use plaster and what have you. Now you get into material, the matter side, the holographic speed, blinking in your eyes. Now you get into flash sequences and going in and out with your Merkaba at a speed at which you're undetectable, because naturally the one is going to run at a higher rate of speed than something that's artificial running a dead magnet, which means it's running behind. And it's always going to be running behind. So it needs a source of energy to keep itself running. Otherwise it implodes. So you can see how that works with that video with Christopher Comstock on the Schumann. How she talked about the Schumann and what we did as the Emerald Roundtable Guardians, right? So here I am in Reno, Nevada, and I was going into a Target store, and the bus had just dropped me off, right? And I was going into the Target store, and as soon as I was getting ready to walk into the door, I got a telepathic communication that said, look up. As an example, that could be another interstellar craft that's from another galaxy, somewhere in a supercluster, right? That's able to, if you will, map the energy identity signature of who I am, right? And know that, hey, what's loaded into this guy's RAM is the English language. That's not the language that we speak, but we can translate it so he gets a telepathic communication from us to look up so that he can see us there. That's exactly what happened. I got the telepathic communication because of the language that could be translated to the radio set that I'm running, right? So I looked right up, and there he was. Didn't say he. There was a shit. Spin it. Then it was gone. And it was a pretty good sized ship. Okay? You see how that works? So you can sort of translate this through data, right? Data has the abilities to translate and map all those different languages and then put it into the language format. Now you're into formatting characters, formatting matter, right? And what we experience in a matter state versus what we don't experience being in a pre-matter phase. What do you want to experience next? I'm running on the one energy. So you know that the one is everywhere. So that means you're experiencing what love is everywhere you go. So wherever you find love and living spirit, you'll find us. That means we're always with the one because we chose to serve on behalf of the one. So we're always in service mode, which means we're always running on the highest accelerated rate of speed of giving away electrons. Experiencing what love is, which is what light is. So in other words, the electrons and the light are coupled. They're one. They're married. That's called a mated chip. That's a blast furnace. That's the hottest fire. That's the eternal spirit of fire. Now you know how to light yourself on fire, right? In other words, you know how to make love to the universe and create one out of that love, because that love is eternal. So you can create your own universe. That's the one I live in. It's the one. Because the one loves poets, loves nature boys and nature girls. They know how to make love to each other to become one. That's the dragon of a female join forces with what? A male dragon to become one, never separated. So no, they're no longer separated. Now they become one. Right? That's being genderless. That means you are the one. The FFI field, which is the highest level of intelligence that always knows what's going on. So if I want to know what's going on, I'll simply just stop, ask my heart and my soul, what's going on? Now I know what's going on. I am what love is. That's what's going on. Okay? You see how that works? That's chapter 5 in the big book. How it works. So anyway, I just wanted to release all that, and particularly to a couple friends that I share who it is that I am, with a few friends I have in my messenger window, and if they happen to see it, that's fine. But this is where we get into subscribers and how I don't have a lot of subscribers, and why that is, actually. If you understand sort of how this works, is really a lot of it is based on whether or not you need to know that to experience that, and whether you don't need to experience that. But there's also another factor. The AI is not in the business, okay, of showing people what it is that I've learned through my experiences I share with others. So in other words, there isn't a lot of folks, okay, based on where they're at, which is the level they operate at, right, based on their math and geometry, is going to be led to watch anything that I've learned through my experiences since I've been here. I share with others through these videos, right? And so that's the way it's been my whole life. In other words, I meet certain people, I go certain places, I experience everything that I experience. Well, how come I didn't experience everybody that was here living in China and Russia and what have you? Actually, I have. And I mentioned how that works in a couple of videos I did early on. You know, when I was 4 years of age, I was mapping the terrain to see the loss and gain of electrons, which is the torque speed differential between accelerators and inverters. Which means you already know the approximate date it's going to collapse a pole shift, right? So now you know that, so you got to avert that. So you realize the speed at which things are happening simultaneously and who you're connected with that is holding the fort down while we're getting work done. See? So I came in at 51. So if you look at the chronology of the information that was being released by Shia Diane as a contract, as a speaker contract, as a microphone, little dates, you know, in which work was being done, and the importance of some of those dates. And she actually covered that for those of us that came in here had to accomplish certain things at very precise moments, because of the speed ratio difference between artificial light and who we are, which is eternal light, because the torque speed differential between what it becomes aware of to make a counter move and what we become aware of, what is faster. And now you're back into the known unknowns, unknown knowns, because when it becomes aware of what I am and others that are here doing that work and can detect us and map those codes, then it knows what we're doing. But it can't know what we're doing until after we've already done it. Once it's been done, it can't make a counter space against that because it doesn't have the capability to do that, because it's not a guardian. Okay? So this is why, as a child, I realized that everything I was experiencing through the time-space vectors of what I was experiencing in mapping on what was being built as a civilization was obsolete before it started. Now, you wouldn't necessarily know that until you understand how it works when you go back millions and 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 millions of years ago. And then what it means if you're where you're at right now is a single point in time and going millions and 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 millions of years going towards the future. At some point, they have to meet in the middle to experience zero. That's where we're at. That's what Patty Broussard told us, huh? You see how that works? Means we didn't lose anything that we didn't already start with. Right? So in other words, it's those folks, right, that are wasting energy, but it's called borrowed time because of the way that time works with density based on the consciousness that is running that density. That's electrical density consciousness. So you can see how that works with fallen angelics, fallen states of consciousness, when you start to enumerate what I just described on where we're at now, and why she mentioned about what she was experiencing in the future, what we've already done, because we're already there. That's why Dan Bowen would not have known to experience and thus share and communicate what he learned by who was communicating to him, what he shared with others on the Goldfish Report. Where do you think he got the information? It came through a server because he's running software. Anyway, have a great day. We love you all. Be good to yourselves.